The base woke slowly under a sky already heavy with clouds. The first light of morning glinted off the wet tarmac, where F-16s lined the flight line, their sleek forms waiting for the day's mission. Engines coughed to life in turn as ground crews moved with practiced precision. Loading equipment and checking systems, the air smelled of fuel, oil, and the sharp promise of rain carried on the wind. Storm clouds hovered low on the horizon, dark shapes that seemed to watch the base as closely as the crews watched their machines. Inside the operations tent, the hum of conversation blended with the soft tap of fingers on keyboards and the rustle of paper maps being unfolded and spread across tables. Ava stood near the largest map table, her long blonde hair tied back but already escaping its tie as the breeze pushed through the open tent flaps. She wore a plain tan flight jacket, its fabric faded at the edges, and dark tactical pants scuffed at the knees. Her uniform bore no insignia, no rank to catch the eye. Her focus stayed on the maps before her, one hand holding a pencil as she traced routes and marked fuel stops with careful precision. Her work was quiet, deliberate, each line drawn to account for what others dismissed. She had charted the main flight path, of course, but also two backup routes, one hugging the valley and the other skirting the edge of the storm. Each had fuel points noted, terrain markers identified, and radio checkpoints planned down to the last detail. Around her, the tent filled with the energy of pilots and officers preparing for the joint exercise. They spoke with easy confidence, voices rising in bursts of laughter or quick instructions. The storm was noted, but not feared. It was, to most of them, just another variable, another line on a weather report. Ava's maps, spread wide across the table, caught glances, but little attention. Someone passing behind her chuckled softly, their voice low, but not so low that it was not meant to be heard. The map queen is at it again, drawing mazes for us to get lost in. Another pilot smirked and added that they would be fine as long as they flew fast enough to outrun the paperwork. The words stung in the way only casual dismissal can. But Ava kept her gaze on the chart, her pencil moving steadily, her posture unshaken. The storm beyond the base crept closer with each passing hour. The clouds thickened, their lower edges frayed by the wind, their bellies heavy with the rain that would soon fall. Ava saw the signs, the subtle shift in the air, the cooling breeze that slipped through the tent, the way the light dimmed as the morning wore on. She marked her maps accordingly, adjusting fuel estimates, noting where the storm's edge might block visibility, or where downdrafts could trouble the F-16s as they returned. These details, she knew, mattered, but few shared her view. A junior officer, leaning over a tablet, snapped a quick photo of her map and grinned as he typed a caption beneath the image. The safest way to slow down. He showed it to a colleague, who laughed and shook his head, before the image found its way to a group chat shared among the Squadron. The joke spread faster than the storm ever could. Ava saw the flash of the screen, heard the soft ripple of laughter that followed, and said nothing. She did not look up. Instead, she finished marking her final route, checked the coordinates once more, and gathered the papers with practiced care. The tension in the tent rose as the time for takeoff neared. Pilots pulled on flight gear, checked comms, and strode toward their jets with the confidence of those who believed the day would go as planned. Ava stood by the map table, watching the storm inch closer. The darkness at its edge, a promise no one seemed willing to hear. The wind shifted again, stronger now, carrying the first fine mist of rain across the field. The storm waited, as did Ava's maps, drawn and ready, overlooked but certain in their purpose. The work was done, the routes were set, the storm would come, and with it, the test of what they all thought they knew. The operations tent pulsed with energy as late morning brought the mission briefing to life. The air was thick with the scent of coffee, fuel, and the first hint of rain that drifted in through the open flaps. The hum of conversation filled the space, voices rising as pilots compared notes, joked about the storm on the horizon, and checked their gear with practiced ease. Laughter punctuated the air, easy and confident, the kind that comes before a mission when danger still feels distant. The storm clouds pressed lower, the light inside the tent dimming just enough to draw attention if anyone had been watching the sky. But most eyes stayed on their charts, their equipment, or on one another, caught up in the familiar rhythm of preparation. Ava stood near the edge of the tent, close enough to the map table to hear every word of the briefing, but far enough to stay unnoticed by those eager for action. Her long, blonde hair had slipped loose from its tie, the wind teasing it across her cheek as she leaned over the maps she had drawn. She wore her plain tan flight jacket and dark tactical pants, her posture straight, her focus steady. The maps beneath her hands were marked with layers of routes, fuel stops, and storm predictions, each line drawn with care, each note added with purpose. As updated weather reports filtered in, she adjusted the routes slightly, pencil scratching softly against the paper as she worked. The storm had shifted, and its pace quickening, its path edging closer to the planned flight corridor. She saw the change, marked it, and continued to refine the alternatives that no one had asked for. The squadron leader stood at the front of the room, voice strong, pointing at the main route on a larger map pinned to the wall. His words carried confidence, certainty shaped by experience. The primary route was clear enough, he said, fast and direct. There was no need to overcomplicate things. He glanced briefly in Ava's direction, his tone polite but firm as he added that they appreciated the effort on the backups, but speed would keep them safe. The room murmured agreement. One of the pilots, younger than most, smirked and said if they flew fast enough, they would beat the storm before it knew they were there. The line drew chuckles, heads nodding, boots shifting as tension bled away into easy bravado. Ava said nothing, her eyes returning to the map. She traced the route once more, adjusting a marker where the storm's edge had moved, noting where fuel reserves would run tight if they were forced to divert. Her pencil tapped lightly against the table as she paused, listening as the room filled with confident chatter. Another voice, light with amusement, remarked that Ava's maps were so cautious they might as well stay on the ground and have tea. The laughter came again. Not cruel, just careless. It slid over her like the first drops of rain that began to spatter the tent canvas, unnoticed until they became a storm. Near the back of the room, a young officer leaned over, lifted his phone, and snapped a quick photo of the detailed charts spread beneath Ava's hands. The screen glowed as he typed a caption. The safest way to slow down. The image passed from one device to another, shared with quiet snickers, a private joke made public within the tight circle of those who believed they had nothing to fear. Ava caught the movement, saw the flicker of screens, heard the soft ripple of reaction, but kept her gaze steady. She drew a slow breath, checked her work again, and began folding the maps with care, tucking the top sheet into a clear sleeve, marking its position on the table before stepping back. Outside, the sound of engines rising filled the air as the F-16s powered up, their sleek forms gleaming beneath the clouded sky. The first drops of rain became a steady mist, carried on the breeze, cool against faces warmed by effort and focus. Ava stood at the tent's edge, watching as the pilots strode toward their aircraft, helmets in hand, visors down, confidence unshaken. The storm loomed darker now, its edge ragged where the wind tore at it, its heart hidden behind layers of cloud and rain. The first jets lifted, their roar cutting through the growing quiet of those left behind. Ava's maps remained on the table, their lines and notes waiting, the work done, the warnings given, the test ahead. The storm met the F-16s with a force no one had expected. What had seemed manageable on the radar that morning now stretched across the sky like a wall, dark and churning, its edges torn by wind, its heart thick with rain and fury. The main route, the one chosen with confidence and speed in mind, was blocked by fast-moving storm cells that swallowed visibility in scattered formations. From the base operations tent, Ava listened as the first reports came through. The pilots' voices, once light and sure, grew clipped and tight with strain. The storm was on them faster than any had guessed. Hostile radar locks complicated what had already become a test of endurance and nerve. The squadron's clean plan frayed under pressure, the direct path now a trap between weather and threat. Radio chatter filled the tent, loud at first, then desperate. Instructions overlapped, call signs tangled in static, voices rising as clarity slipped away. The storm played havoc with signals, rain and wind smothering words, leaving bursts of sound swallowed by noise. Ava stood at the map table, fingers resting lightly on the edges of the chart she had drawn, eyes moving from one point to another as coordinates came through in pieces. She tracked each voice, each bearing, marking them on the map with small, steady movements of her pencil. The room behind her, so loud with confidence earlier, grew tense as the weight of the situation took hold. Officers leaned in toward radios, voices lower now, strained. The F-16s were scattered, fuel running low as the storm forced them farther from base and from one another. Attempts to reroute failed. The storm cells shifted faster than the jets could move. Clear paths closed behind sheets of rain and wind that battered the aircraft, shook them as they fought to hold formation or find gaps in the clouds. Hostile radar painted them, forcing evasive turns that cost precious fuel. The storm had become not a line on a chart, but a living barrier that tested every choice they had made. Ava kept her place at the map table, watching the picture unfold, seeing where the main route's promise had given way to disaster. She heard the change in the pilots' voices, the tilt toward panic as options narrowed, as fuel gauges dropped toward danger. What had been dismissed as too cautious now lay before them as the only way through. She did not speak yet. She waited, listened, marked where they were, where they had tried to go, and where the storm blocked their way. The map she had drawn was no longer a suggestion, but the key to survival. The backup routes she had planned, the fuel stops no one wanted to hear about, the terrain that offered cover, all waited on paper, while those in the air struggled. The storm's voice filled the tent through the radios, the drum of rain on canvas joining the sound of engines straining, of pilots calling bearings, of requests for options that seemed to vanish as quickly as they were spoken. Ava drew a breath, steady, measured, and prepared. The moment had come when the work no one wanted to see would mean everything. The map beneath her hands, once a target of mockery, was now the answer waiting to be heard. The storm lashed the base with relentless force, rain striking the tent walls so hard it sounded like gravel thrown by an angry hand. The wind tore at the canvas, making it ripple and groan. The sky outside had become a wall of dark gray, broken only by streaks of lightning that lit the world for a breath before vanishing again into shadow. Inside the operations tent, the air was heavy with the weight of uncertainty. The energy that had filled the space earlier was gone. What remained was tension, sharp and silent, as the crew watched the radios and listened to voices that had lost their confidence. The squadron was in trouble. The main route was gone, swallowed by the storm. Radar locks had forced evasive maneuvers that scattered the F-16s. Fuel was running low. The pilots' voices came through in bursts, tangled with static, strained with the effort of trying to find a way out. Bearings were given and lost. Positions were reported and contradicted. The storm played havoc with their instruments. It was impossible to tell where safety lay. And through it all, no one in the operations tent had an answer. No one except Ava. She stepped forward without drama or demand, her motion quiet but certain. Her long, blonde hair was damp, loose strands clinging to her face. Her plain tan flight jacket was creased at the elbows, her dark tactical pants marked with mud where she had crossed the field earlier to double-check wind patterns no one had cared about. She reached for the headset, fingers steady, and set it on. The room fell silent, except for the storm's roar and the soft hum of monitors struggling to hold their image. No one stopped her. No one spoke. The voices that had filled the space with certainty that morning had nothing left to give. Ava's voice came through the static, low at first, then firm as she found the rhythm of the comms. She called the lead pilot by name, gave him bearing and distance, and told him to bring his formation to a mark on the map that only she had studied. The squadron leader hesitated for a breath, then answered. His voice was tight but willing. They had no other path. Ava guided them to the valley's bend, where the terrain offered a shield from the storm's worst winds and the enemy's search. She spoke of gaps in the ridgeline, of fuel stops no one had planned to use. Her tone was calm, her words clear. Each instruction was given with precision. No waste, no doubt. The map beneath her hand was no longer a sheet of paper dismissed as overcaution. It was the map that would bring them home. Ava marked each position as the pilots reported in, adjusting for the storm's push, for the fuel levels dropping toward critical. She spoke in measured cadence, giving the pilots the focus they needed to keep flying. The radios carried her voice through the storm, the static breaking just enough for her words to land. The operations crew stood silent, watching, listening. The storm battered the tent, but inside, the only sound that mattered was Ava's voice and the faint replies of the pilots trusting her to lead them out. Outside, the storm's fury grew as if trying to drown her out. Lightning flashed so close the tent glowed white for a breath, shadows stark and sharp. Rain poured off the edges of the canvas in streams, turned the ground beneath the tent to slick mud that oozed under boots and pooled at the corners. The wind tore at the ropes, made the walls shudder. But inside, Ava stayed steady. Her pencil moved over the map, tracking each jet's position, adjusting paths to shorten distance without risking the squadron's safety. Fuel numbers came through, some dangerously low. Ava did not flinch. She gave the next heading, pointed them to the nearest field marked for emergency landings, a detail no one but her had thought would matter. The tension in the tent coiled tighter as the minutes dragged. The room held its breath with each report, with each confirmation that another jet had found the valley's cover, had made the turn, had spotted the fuel point in the break between storm bands. The loud confidence that had filled the room hours before was gone. What remained was respect, unspoken but present, for the quiet voice that brought order where there had been none. Ava's hands stayed sure, her tone unchanged. She reminded the pilots to trust the map, to follow the ridge's line, to take the fuel when it came. Each mile closed was a victory. Each report of sighting the base's edge was a relief felt through the tension of those who waited. The storm did not give up easily. It chased them to the last, rain hammering the jets, wind pulling at wings already weary from the fight. But the map held, the plan held. Ava's guidance carried the squadron through, each jet drawing closer to home, fuel gauges nearly empty, but hope restored. The radios that had once crackled with overconfidence now carried quiet thanks, pilots who knew they owed their lives to the plan they had dismissed. Ava kept her focus until the last jet cleared the storm's grip, until the last voice reported safe position. Only then did she lift her hand from the map. Only then did she draw a breath that let the weight of the moment settle. The storm had tested them all, but it was the quiet strength that led them through. The storm had begun to loosen its grip as evening fell across the base. The rain softened to a steady patter, and the wind no longer howled but whispered through the cracks in the canvas of the operations tent. The sky, bruised with deep gray and faint streaks of gold, where the sun fought to break through, seemed to hold its breath along with everyone watching. Inside the tent, the tension had not lifted yet. The crew stood close, eyes on the radios, ears straining for each report, each confirmation that the squadron was still holding together as it drew nearer to home. The hum of the equipment filled the silence that no one dared break. Ava stood at the map table, headset still in place, her pencil resting beside the charts that bore the marks of every turn, every adjustment, every life she had helped steer through the storm. Out beyond the flight line, the first glint of an F-16's nose broke through the low cloud. Its lights flickered through the mist, engine coughing with the last of its fuel, paint streaked by rain and wind. The sound of its approach was thin at first, then grew as the jet lined up with the runway. Gear lowering, flaps adjusting, the pilot's voice steady now but worn from the effort of getting there. The base crew froze for a moment, watching as the jet touched down, tires meeting the wet tarmac with a hiss that echoed across the field. The F-16 rolled to a stop, canopy still closed, engine winding down. A breath seemed to pass through the crowd, tension releasing if only for a moment. Another jet appeared, then another, each one emerging from the remnants of the storm like ghosts returning from a battle that no one could see but all felt. Engines coughed, lights blinked, wings bore the marks of wind shear and driving rain, but each aircraft landed true. The crews ran to meet them, helping the pilots down, checking gear, securing the jets with the care given to things that matter most. But as each pilot stepped from the cockpit, their eyes searched not the hangars, not the officers, but the operations tent. They sought the woman who had spoken when no one else could, the voice that had drawn them through the storm's heart. Ava remained at her post, headset removed now, maps still open on the table, each path marked, each adjustment noted. Her hands rested lightly on the edge of the chart, fingers tracing the lines not as boast, but as confirmation of what she had known would matter. The squadron leader approached slowly, his stride steady but marked by the weight of the day. His uniform was damp at the edges, his boots tracked mud from the field, and his face bore the exhaustion of decisions made and lessons learned. He stopped in front of Ava, his gaze level, no words at first. Then he nodded, a simple gesture, but one that spoke of respect earned, of thanks given without fanfare. When he did speak, his voice was low, meant for her alone. You brought us home, Ava. We would not have made it without you. Ava met his eyes, her expression calm, the same quiet strength that had guided her through the crisis still present. I just did my part, she said, and she meant it. There was no pride in her tone, only the truth as she saw it. The map had been the guide, the plan the shield. Her voice, the thread that kept them tied to hope. Around them, the crew settled into the work of recovery, of checking the jets, of preparing for the next day. The storm's edge retreated, the sky opened in patches, and the first stars blinked faintly through the clearing clouds. The operations tent seemed smaller now, the storm's noise gone, replaced by the soft murmur of voices returning to routine. The radios quieted, the monitors dimmed, their work done for now. Ava gathered her papers with care, folding each map along its creases, the lines worn where her pencil had traced them again and again. She did not need to look at them to remember. The paths were in her mind as much as they were on the page. The crew moved around her, respectful now, no longer dismissive, but she asked for nothing. The work spoke for itself. Outside, the F-16s stood in rows, their forms solid against the darkened sky, the glow of the field lights reflecting off their wings. They bore the storm's marks, but they were home. Ava stepped to the edge of the tent, the night air cool against her face, the scent of rain-washed earth filling her lungs. The weight of the day pressed at her, but she carried it lightly, knowing that what had been done would endure longer than any words spoken in the moment. The squadron lead paused once more before heading to his crew, offering one last glance of respect. Others followed, nods given where jokes had been before, silence where laughter had covered doubt. The respect Ava earned lived in that silence, in the peace that came after the storm, in the knowledge shared by all who had witnessed the quiet strength that had guided them home. She did not need to stay to hear it. The work was done, the maps put away. The day recorded not in speeches or praise, but in the safe return of those who had once doubted her plan. The field lights flickered as the power reset. The storm's touch still felt in small ways. The base settled. The night deepened, and Ava turned back to her charts, not to seek credit, but to prepare for what might come next. The respect she earned was not asked for, not demanded, but given freely, felt in the stillness that followed the storm, in the quiet nods that replaced the noise of the morning. And in that stillness, Ava stood as she always had, ready, unseen by most, but known now by those who mattered most. The jets rested on the field, the storm behind them, the path home drawn by the hand they had once overlooked. The night closed gently around the base, and peace settled where the storm had once ruled. Ava remained at her post, steady as the maps she kept, steady as the strength that had carried them through. Night had settled over the base, soft and deep, wrapping the world in quiet after the long fight of the day. The storm had passed, leaving behind clean air heavy with the scent of rain and earth. Lights glowed along the flight line, their reflections stretching across the wet tarmac in long, golden bands. The F-16s stood in neat rows, their bodies still marked by the storm's fury, but at peace now, beneath the stars that had begun to break through the thinning clouds. The hum of quiet work filled the night as ground crews moved with care, securing equipment, checking systems, and preparing for the tasks that would come with the next dawn. The sharp edges of urgency were gone, replaced by a steady rhythm of duty met and lives returned. In a small office near the edge of the flight line, Ava sat at her desk, the glow of a single lamp casting a warm circle of light on the worn surface. The window was cracked open, letting in the cool night breeze that carried with it the faint murmur of voices and the soft clink of tools against metal. The map from the operations tent, now folded and marked by the day's work, rested beside her. On the operations board, its duplicate remained pinned in place, no longer a source of jokes or careless comments. It stood as a reminder of what had been done, of the paths drawn by a steady hand that had brought the squadron home. Ava's pencil moved across the logbook in slow, deliberate strokes. She recorded the mission's facts with precision, noting time, position, weather conditions, and fuel levels as they had been reported. There was no flourish in her writing, no attempt to frame the story as more than it was. She wrote the truth as it had happened, letting the record stand on its own. The weight of the day rested in her shoulders, but it was a weight she bore with quiet satisfaction, rather than pride. The work had been done, the lives saved, and that was enough. Outside her window, the base settled deeper into peace. The last of the maintenance crews finished their rounds, their voices low as they shared the final checks. The night air was cool on Ava's face as she paused, looking out across the field. The F-16s gleamed under the lamps, their forms strong and sure despite the scars of the storm. Each one was a mark of what had been preserved, a testament to the plan that had guided them through. The tarmac shone with the memory of rain, its surface holding the light like water, reflecting the stars above and the steady work below. Ava set her pencil down and closed the logbook, the sound soft in the quiet room. She rose, stretching the stiffness from her back, and crossed to the window, resting her hands on the sill. The night was deep now, the storm's final traces gone from the air, leaving only calm. The base lay at rest, the weight of the day lifted, but not forgotten. Ava stood for a long moment, watching, letting the peace settle over her as it had over the field. She thought of the maps, the plan, the voices that had called through the storm, and the way they had found their way home. There was no need for more. The legacy she left was in the work done well, in the lives that had flown back through the dark because of lines drawn on a map when no one had believed they would matter. In the quiet of the office, Ava returned to her desk, gathered the folded map, and placed it in the drawer where she kept her records. The map would stay there, worn but whole, ready for whatever might come next. She switched off the lamp, the room falling into soft shadow, and stepped out into the night. The air was fresh, filled with the promise of dawn not far off. The base, the field, the jets, and the stars bore witness to the strength that had guided them through. And in that quiet, Ava walked the edge of the tarmac, unseen by most, but known now by those who had followed her through the storm. The work was done. The night was hers. The peace she had helped win would carry them all forward into the day that waited beyond the dark. Ava's story is not one of loud victories or demands for praise. It is the story of quiet strength, of preparation that asked for no attention but saved lives when it mattered most. She was overlooked, called too cautious, her work dismissed until the storm came, and the confident voices fell silent. In that moment, it was Ava's steady hand and careful plan that brought the squadron home. Her legacy lives in the maps she drew, the lives she guided through the dark, and the respect earned not by what she said, but by what she did. Take a moment to reflect on the unseen strengths in your own life or in those around you. Share your thoughts in the comments and follow for more stories where quiet courage rises when it is needed most. Sometimes the strongest voice is the one you almost missed.